The Fox propaganda network is so thirsty to distance Donald Trump from America's withdrawal of Afghanistan, even though the facts conclusively prove that he set the stage for what was to come. Intrigued? Then click that like, subscribe, and the alert bell, and enjoy the video. So even though it happened about 2 years ago, America's withdrawal from Afghanistan is a constant topic on this channel for various reasons. It was arguably the biggest foreign policy decision, not only of the Biden administration, but of the last decade. And it was also, for the Biden administration, kind of the turning point for the president's popularity. Prior to our withdrawal from Afghanistan, President Biden was relatively very popular as a president, certainly much more popular than Donald Trump ever was. But after he metaphorically pulled the trigger on our withdrawal from Afghanistan, that was the turning point in which we saw the inevitable decline of President Biden's popularity. And, he's basically been underwater in terms of popular support ever since, with very few exceptions. So it's a major political and foreign policy event. So having said that, a lot of people have been looking to reporting and fact-finding missions like an Inspector General report on, which we're going to discuss here in a second, on what exactly happened, because we airlifted more than 120,000 people out of Afghanistan, but it was widely seen and portrayed by the media as chaotic. And in many cases it was. It certainly wasn't organized, even though I would submit, and I think most actual military and diplomatic experts would submit that in a situation like that, kind of like, the closest comparable example to the United States would be Vietnam, 50 years ago, it's not possible to orderly, smoothly, effortlessly evacuate hundreds of thousands of people out of a rapidly collapsing nation that is being invaded by a hostile adversary. So I don't think there was any way for there to ever be a smooth exit from Afghanistan, given the facts. I think the vast majority of people, conservative and liberal in terms of military experts, would say the same thing. It was just not possible. Now, that's not to say that it couldn't have been done better, right? There's a difference between bad and worse, right? So there's room for criticism of the Biden administration and the Trump administration, but that's really the big part. Because on the Fox propaganda network, they are determined either to, like on the opinion shows, they are obviously much more overt in their propaganda, but even on the quote-unquote hard news side, you have people like Dana Perino, who, by the way, was a former Bush administration, I think she was either a press secretary or communications director, so she's involved or was involved with the Republican Party, hardly nonpartisan. Even they are determined to insinuate that President Biden bears all of the blame for everything that went on, and also none of the credit as well. So it's this really weird asymmetry. But I want to play this clip in which Dana Perino kind of gives the game away, and then we're going to fact check her in real time.
Afghanistan in 2001. And we did a hell of a job that first year we were there. What happened those next 20 years, I think, was more politics than strategy. I truly believe that. It felt like, as someone as a boot on the ground, like we didn't fight a 20-year war. We fought 10 two-year wars. And midterms and presidential elections seemed to sway the strategy as much as anything. That may not be completely true, but it certainly felt that way from 2005 when I joined until I saw our last troops leave.
What do you think about the State Department report, though, lumping in Trump with them? Because I think Trump answers this very well when he's asked about it in terms of, yes, we wanted to get out, but if I had been in charge, we would have done it in a different way.
If you read On Killing by Dave Grossman, he talks about, we always say fight or flight, but there's two other things there called submission and posture. Posturing is huge. Trump talked with hyperbole, and even to his own generals, hey, you will do this or else. So they bring him the best option. It was my belief that we were never going to be every troop out of Afghanistan, but we were going to change our posture such that we wouldn't feel at war in Afghanistan. And Trump's way of doing that was through hyperbole. That's what I believe before he lost re-election, before Biden lost Afghanistan. So I think it's difficult to look at President Biden and President Trump in the same light on this. With that being said, I don't blame President Biden for us losing the Afghan war.
Right.
However, of four presidents that presided over it, he's the only one that had 8 years experience with it before he became president. So I expected more of him.
So right there, the person in question talks about, how he expected more out of President Biden given his experience. Once again, grading Republicans on a bit of a curve here. Now, again, it's kind of, he was speaking out of both sides of his mouth in that respect because he says, I don't blame President Biden for losing Afghanistan, just expected more out of him. But you know what? Fine. Perfectly fair enough. Dana Perino's comments are the ones that I take issue with the most. And the fact of the matter is that there was a comprehensive Inspector General report, Special Inspector General for the Afghanistan Reconstruction, Why Afghan Security Forces Collapse. And we discussed this in previous videos, but the conclusions are inevitable. The fact of the matter is that, yes, decisions by the Biden administration, tactical decisions, helped contribute to the situation on the ground. But also, on a broader strategic level, the Trump administration absolutely contributed to it as well. First, with the decision to get out of Afghanistan, which demoralized the Afghan government and their military, but also decisions made along the way. So as we've discussed before, and as the Inspector General report notes, not only did Trump's decision demoralize the Afghan government because he made a deal directly with the Taliban, it didn't include the Afghan government, which is a huge demoralizing effect and, inflamed tendencies towards corruption and everything else that contributed to the rapid collapse later on. But Trump also failed. This is the deal maker, right? This is the guy who wrote The Art of the Deal. Guys, I do deals better than anybody. Believe me, nobody knows how to withdraw from hostile foreign countries better than me. Believe me, bigly. The fact of the matter is that Trump failed to enforce the provisions of the deal. So this man, who is, again, a serial philanderer and a malignant narcissist and a pathological liar, the one and only time he commits to a deal, the one and only time that he agrees to terms and follows through with them is when he makes a deal with the Taliban. So he said he would retrograde U.S. forces and U.S. personnel, and he did. At the time Trump made the deal to get out of Afghanistan, we had like 13,000 troops in Afghanistan, 13,000. And by the time President Biden took office, Trump had retrograded, had taken away U.S. military forces from 13,000 to fewer than 3,000, right? So he basically left Biden 3,000 troops to do with what he will, okay? At the same time, Trump also failed to enforce the provisions on the Taliban. The Taliban, they were supposed to comply with like 8 provisions, 8 terms of a deal. And the only one that they complied with was to not shoot U.S. troops. That's it. The other 7, Donald Trump didn't bother to enforce. Meanwhile, Trump honored all of his terms, so he continued to retrograde U.S. forces. He pressured the Afghan government to release 5,000 imprisoned Taliban fighters. So let's do the math there. He leaves Biden fewer than 3,000 U.S. troops, while at the same time giving the Taliban back 5,000. He gave the Taliban more fighters than he left Biden. So what was Biden's option when he inherited this mess? Now, it's true. People are like, well, Biden could have told the Taliban, hey, we're doing a new deal, or I'm not honoring this deal. It's true that he had the executive authority to rip up Trump's agreement, but practical constraints are what they are. Again, time doesn't reset when a president is inaugurated, Republican or Democrat, right? Every president inherits the context that is left for them by their successor, good or bad, Republican or Democrat. It's true. So Donald Trump, for example, he inherited the Afghan situation left for him by President Obama. And by the way, President Obama wasn't perfect with the situation in Afghanistan. 4 administrations, 4, contributed to the situation in Afghanistan. You have the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, and yes, the Biden administration. So Trump didn't inherit a great situation with Afghanistan either, okay? I don't blame him for everything. But that consideration is never made for Democrats by Republicans, or even, quite frankly, by major elements of the centrist voter, the centrist media. A lot of them, again, continue to grade Democrats on a curve. Well, the fact of the matter is Trump set the stage for failure. He made the commitment. Biden was obligated to honor the commitment because what was the alternative? If he told the Taliban, hey, I'm not going to honor Trump's deal, the Taliban would start shooting U.S. personnel and U.S. allies. Then what? Then Biden would be responsible for that in the eyes of Republicans. How dare you allow the Taliban to start fighting us again? And then we would have effectively had to reinvade the country because, again, we had fewer than 3,000 troops with which to police it, whereas Trump gave the Taliban 2,000 people more than that to help invade the country. Like, it just makes no sense, to say nothing of the fact that during the Bush administration, during the Obama administration, this is a bipartisan issue, and yes, again, during the Trump administration, we had no effective means to keep track of all the assets that we either sold to the Afghan government or loaned to the Afghan government or let them borrow, which is another reason why when people talk about, I can't believe we didn't get everything out. Well, there was no way to get everything out, man. What do you expect? Over the span of 20 years, we didn't track it, and that was a Republican issue and a Democrat issue. Biden's supposed to just come in, inherit the context left for him, and come up with a magic solution. It's impossible. People need to recalibrate their expectations accordingly. And it's really pathetic to see, again, the Fox propaganda network, even their hard news section like Dana Perino, pretend that this was a bipartisan, or excuse me, that this was exclusively the fault of the Biden administration, when the facts clearly show otherwise, and Trump contributed to it as well.